So imagine this, two mining companies, same stage, same commodities, same region, both looking to raise $350 million through debt and equity to put their critical mineral project into production. Both have organized an international roadshow covering the US, Europe, UK. And Company A walks into its first meeting in New York, into an institutional fund manager's office, and they start off in a bold way by highlighting the verification of their responsibility plan. Yeah, that's a little nuance, we know. There's no point talking about an ESG and sustainability. That doesn't always go down so well in some quarters. But this is the point. When it's done properly, it's risk mitigation. And they show, right out in the gate of the first few minutes, they show, not just tell, they show how they're actively managing key risks, social license, permitting hurdles, environmental impacts, and demonstrating strong governance. Company B follows them in a couple of weeks later. They walk in full of promise. They talk about the great geology, the wonderful upside in exploration, the PFS study that's got fantastic numbers, very similar to Company A's project. But they don't have a validation document in front of them. They haven't had the benefit of an independent assessment, which gives them the insight to know where their potential risks are. And they have not able, therefore, to be able to tell how they'll deliver this mine in a risk-mitigated fashion to deliver it responsibly. So 3 months later, one of those companies secures the financing at very competitive terms with a tier one name. The other is still pitching. They're still hearing the same line of, we like the asset, but come back when you're a little bit further on. Effectively a polite, but rather disappointing and almost disparaging result that raises the question, am I missing something? Has the landscape changed to what it used to be like? Capital today doesn't fund promise. It funds proven, responsible, risk-mitigated delivery. And that's where verification opens the door. But it's what you do next that defines whether or not you walk through that door. So in mining, it's not really the lack of upside that holds companies back. It's the failure to build trust at the key moments that they can deliver responsibly going forward. Let's just take a second to understand this. The challenge is not once you're in production and you've de-risked or you've addressed the teething issues and you're ramping the project or the asset up and the production up. In fact, I would argue that the most opportune time for investment is at that moment, because most of the problems are behind them, and it's really a commodity risk at that stage. The challenge is the chasm in terms of designing and developing and then building that mine. That's where the problems go wrong. That's where the stats say that this sector has an enormous amount of trust and confidence to build in order to attract the capital. The sector has a credibility gap at this stage. Too often great projects have failed because they couldn't manage the social, environmental, or permitting risks. And too often companies failed to communicate how they were preparing in that design development phase. Verification gives you the credibility to bridge that gap, to be better prepared. But that is just the start. So once you've got a verified plan, you've completed an assessment, you've shared it with your board, embed it into your strategy. Don't let it sit on a shelf for a year and do nothing with it. As I say, this is not a badge. This is very much a working document to help mitigate the risk and then ultimately communicate that. So make this part of the roadmap as part of your strategy. Engage with the board with it. Identify key risks with which you want to mitigate in the short term, maybe days, weeks, or even months, and in the medium and then longer term in terms of aspirations as to how you want to develop or effectively integrate new ideas into the project. Incorporate it within KPIs. at executive level and also potentially at also operational level. It was only last year I was talking to a senior executive chairman of a major mining company where they wanted to incorporate sustainability in a methodical, standardized basis with their operations using the Digbee format. Use it as part of an incentive for remuneration. Help the strategy to evolve so that it goes throughout the culture of the business, so that you lower risk in all areas, whether it's faster permitting or lower health and safety issues, whether or not it is greater identification of challenges in the future so that you're better prepared and more resilient. As I say, don't let this sit on the shelf. Use it to maximize the value and then communicate it, engage it, and use it within the strategy throughout board meetings, management meetings, and with your operational contractors. And then let it be the proof that ensures that your company differentiates and wins. Be bold with the communication. Just think of a few different areas. Incorporate it very much in terms of your investor deck. Bring it right up front into the first quarter of your presentation. Allow that fund manager to recognize that they can invest in this company because they are the management team that are on top of the issues, subject to obviously all the other areas of value and the asset itself coming up to scratch. Use it as part of the permitting discussions to ensure that the regulators are aware of your aspirations and where you're trying to go with this. There are many examples where permitting can be advanced in creating parallel permitting rather than sequential, just by increasing confidence within what this management team is trying to do over the short and medium term, and to ensure that they've got the protection of communities and environment, etc., as a priority. It's a confidence boosting thing. And with offtake negotiations, the supply chain has made it very clear that they're looking for responsibly sourced materials. Frankly, I don't see this changing. I see this as being further and further embedded within their strategies as reputational risk and surety of supply becomes more and more important. I think we all want green premiums, but I think in reality, what's happening on the ground is that contracts for preferred supplier status are increasingly becoming a common tool to use, whereby instead of a 1-year contract or a 3-year contract, when there's confidence that this is not only they know where the supply is coming from, but also that it's been mined responsibly, then this can extend to a 10-year supply contract, which has enormous benefits in terms of forecasting and business model security. So as I say, let this be the proof that wins the trust and differentiation between you, your peers, and obviously use it to engage internally and externally with all of your different stakeholders. I think the other point is ongoing updating of where you are. The market moves fast, regulations change and tighten. Expectations are constantly rising. Companies that refresh their verification annually are able to communicate so much more effectively, can embed this into strategy very efficiently and effectively to continue to ensure that they're developing and producing a project that is fit for purpose in the modern world. Showing continuous improvement, adapting to industry, societal and global changes, and demonstrating responsibility as a core ingredient of resilience is a strategic advantage. It's not unique to the mining industry, yet the mining industry has this incredible gap where this is an open goal for any company that wants to embrace it. So winning companies don't stop at verification alone as a one-time function. This is an ongoing opportunity and an ongoing process where operations become increasingly aligned, and the culture within their verified plan is a strong ingredient of the company's commitment to moving forward and ultimately, therefore, its risk mitigation strategy. proactively go out and tell this story to capital markets, to regulators, to communities. Keep improving on an ongoing basis, because verified responsibility is a journey. It's not solely a one-off badge of certificate. So I get the fact that change is hard. I get the fact that the mining industry has been doing something for the last 25, 30 years without much change. And I understand that most people's views are that they're still able to raise the money that they need. But if we look at ourselves in the mirror and ask ourselves, how big is this pool of capital? Can it be that much more competitive? Can we be more imaginative with our funding capabilities? Can we lower the cost of capital? What do we need to do to use the tailwinds of critical minerals and gold to enable companies towards new different investment worlds? If we get it right, the opportunities are vast. Many will say in years to come, oh, well, valuations were always going to go higher because they could not have gone any lower. The reality is that if the tide rises all boats, it's those companies that stand out, are different, are risk mitigated, that will have the greatest advantage, will find it easier to access capital, will lower the cost of capital, will have an efficient business that has limited social license issues, will embrace their local communities, will almost certainly have more efficient business strategies. So if we get it right, all companies have the opportunity to lower the cost of capital, to have faster, smoother permitting, to increase valuations, to reduce the friction when it comes to M&A, to enhance the attractiveness of M&A. And let's be honest, whether you're part of the mining industry or of any other sector, to have a stronger, more resilient company goes a long way. When things go wrong, companies get back on their feet much quicker with far less loss in terms of valuation, credibility, or other things. But if we don't embrace this or we get it wrong, the risks continue with where we are at the moment. We will miss funding opportunities from new investors. We'll continue to experience some of the highest cost of capital, which, let's be honest, puts many projects in jeopardy. And no, it's not acceptable. At least it's not acceptable in my mind to say, well, if the world won't pay for our critical minerals, then the energy transition will just be delayed. How do we become part of the 17% of projects that get attractively valued, that have lower risks, and that therefore avoid the project delays and the social opposition that are so frequent? And above all, when it comes down to us as human beings, do we really want to be involved in companies that have a high risk of reputational risk, have a high risk of damaged credibility, which is very hard to recover? The sector is in the starting blocks of recovering its credibility. How can we, as directors, as senior executives, and others involved in these companies, make sure we're on the right side and therefore benefit from these changing winds? So in conclusion, it is all about the competitive edge. Verification marks the start of a really, really exciting journey. Those that take credibility and embed it into every strategy, into every plan and action, will define the leaders of tomorrow. There's a huge blue ocean out there for this industry. We just need to find which boat to sit on and therefore to benefit from it. And in a world where the investment rules have already changed, verified responsibility is how you stay ahead of the game and mark that differentiation between your project and others, between your management team and others, and between the brand of your company and others. Thank you very much indeed. This really completes the webinar series that we've been embarked on. You can find all of these webinars on our YouTube channel, but equally, we're open to any discussion and suggestions, or perhaps even a panel session on any of this. And please do get in contact with any ideas as to how we can improve this. We are in the process of putting together a new webinar for September on communication, because while the action of embracing sustainability and responsibility is the most important element in order to mitigate risk internally, how we communicate this is the key difference between those companies that are silent and those that are not.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for this morning, or certainly from here in the UK. I just want to take a personal note to add to what has just been said. And when I founded Digbee a few years ago, I saw, really on the back of 30 years in the finance industry, the same challenge happening again and again and again. And really, that was great projects failing or finding it difficult and struggling to raise capital despite having really good geology and great teams on board. It lacked the credible and independent insight. And I think really what I wanted to do, and really encouraged by many in the finance industry, which has continued, is to come up with something which could really help cross the chasm of how do we design and develop and therefore execute, so that we address the 83% of companies that go beyond budget, as was stated in these webinars. And mining is tough. Challenge and change is tough. Trust is even tougher. And I think the companies that embed sustainability and able to therefore communicate their responsibility and therefore have a lower risk are increasingly finding that their valuations, their recognition within the marketplace is fundamentally different. But I think it's also helping companies become more efficient, both in terms of management and operations. And so this isn't just an exercise of communication. It's very much an exercise of taking leadership on to be able to deliver that and get across that chasm, which has become such a statistical issue. Now, I'm a great believer. To some extent, some call me an optimist, and I do see the tide is turning for many of the commodities that we're seeing, and I think we can all be grateful for that after the many years. That in itself, though, is not really the change that we all want. What we want to do is to achieve, as in the gold industry, you've seen Agnico Eagle take the premier spot, and how do we therefore replicate that premium position? How do we replicate the stability, resilience, and credibility that a company and its management team have stood for? So I hope that kind of brings all together these 4 webinars. Perhaps we just move on to a couple of questions. The first one, which has come up, says, we've already done some ESG reporting. How do you avoid verification becoming a one-off badge rather than something that drives real operational change? Well, I think if I'm being brutally honest here, I think the challenge within the ESG space as a whole over the course of the last 4 or 5 years has been the confusion that has led to where we are at the moment. I think a lot of the changes within ESG becoming a vogue and then blowing up and then not really knowing where it is, has become a real challenge to understand. I think what we've tried to do is to really understand where is the value add at the company level, at the operational level, at the site level, and how can that help a company become more efficient and more effective, so that we can then communicate it more effectively to different stakeholder groups. The other thing, I think, perhaps, well, maybe I'll just go on to a second question here, which kind of covers the next bit, actually. You've talked about integrating the roadmap, but how do we actually use verification to support things like financing or permitting in real time. I think again, this is very much spreading over the area between compliance and therefore real action on the ground. Compliance is a necessity, and I think it's important that we obviously communicate our compliance effectively. But what really matters is the decision-ready capability of a management team in order to address either challenges on the ground when they happen, or ultimately answer questions across the table from potential investors. I think the other thing is when if you're going to go through the Digbee solution, the report in itself is not just a single point of report. It very much is an active document throughout that year, which can be integrated within management and board decision making. So that, and I give you a great example with regards to financing. I think this is a key one, is if a company is going to go through financing, it tends to get to a commercial debt provider or private equity group or sophisticated capital, and you suddenly realize, oh wow, I've got to go off and do the equator principles or IFC or whatever, which is pretty standard practice, been around since 2003. The challenge is that this is a wall of questions and activities that need to be addressed. And if we can get ahead of the curve on that, identify not only what needs to come through that, but hopefully also mitigate risk before we go into that communication, then we're going to speed up our whole due diligence time, but also we're going to be ready in order to, which will have addressed obviously things that may need to get done before we can complete that process. So it's very much an efficiency gain as well as an active de-risking process on the ground. The third question which has come up here, and if anybody's got any other questions, please do pop them up. What do you say to companies who see the value in verification but feel it's just another layer of cost and process? And I think it's all of this. It must not be about creating more paperwork and tick box exercises. This must be about removing noise and focusing on the risks, the specific risks that actually determine the ability of that management team to deliver. And you know, if we, sorry to repeat again the chasm that we all face, and I've had conversations in the last 2 or 3 days with industry insiders, some quite senior industry insiders who want to change the narrative. Well, changing the narrative is wonderful. I think we're all on board with that. But unless one understands the source of the problem, then it's very difficult to change the narrative. It's just a sticking plaster. And the source of the problem, there are many. There isn't a single one. The legacy issues, etc., we all know about. But the reality is, if you're an investor and you're going to go in and back a management team to take it through design and development of a project and then on into production, you want to make sure that that capital is safe, is going to get a decent return, and is not going to be an undue risk. The challenge, of course, is that the statistics work against us. And so how do we ensure that we maximize the opportunity to get across that chasm with the limited amount of risk that we can effectively go forward? So the real cost here isn't verification. It's very much the focus of attention of mitigating risks immediately or over the course of the next year or so, and then go from there forward and execute that plan and communicate it effectively to the different stakeholders. I think that kind of draws a close to the questions which I can see here. I would just add again that, first of all, thank you very much for attending. It's been a real pleasure. I feel real goosebumps in starting this process and talking to so many who have added comments either on LinkedIn or personally since. I'm going to be coming down to Australia at the end of July, and if anybody is on this call and down there and wants to meet up, then would be delighted to do so. It'll be in Perth the week of the 28th, and Sydney the week of the, I think it is the 4th or 5th. And I think the last thing I would say is, if you're in the Southern Hemisphere, I hope you have a good winter. If you're in the Northern Hemisphere, have a good summer. And please be in touch if you've got any questions. And thank you very much for listening in. And see you in September for our communications start of our webinar series. I should just, last thing before I add, we've also going to break this up in the course of the next 3 or 4 months with interviews with industry insiders, where there's already 2 people I've approached, and they would be really keen to get on board. So watch out for that news, probably September, October. Many thanks. All the best. Bye-bye.